The telegram arrived on a Tuesday morning in late March of 1878, and Delilah Rawlings knew, before she opened it, that her life in Boston was about to change forever. She stood in the parlor of her modest boarding-house room, the yellow paper trembling between her fingers as she read the words once, twice, 3 times. Her Uncle Marcus was dead. The uncle she had never met, the black sheep of the family who had disappeared westward 30 years ago and never looked back. The uncle whose very name had been spoken in whispers at family gatherings, always accompanied by pursed lips and disapproving glances. And he had left her everything he owned. The lawyer's follow-up letter arrived 2 days later, and that was when Delilah learned exactly what kind of legacy her infamous uncle had bestowed upon her. The house in Jefferson, Texas, was not a respectable boarding establishment or a dignified family home. It was a saloon. Not just any saloon, but one that had hosted gambling, dancing girls, and according to the carefully worded legal documents, women of negotiable virtue who rented rooms on the second floor. Delilah was 23 years old, unmarried and working as a seamstress in a dress shop that paid her barely enough to afford her tiny room and 1 meal a day. She had no family left in Boston, no prospects for marriage, and no reason to stay. But heading west to claim a house of ill repute was not exactly the respectable option a decent woman should consider. She considered it anyway. 3 weeks later, Delilah stepped off the train in Marshall, Texas, traveled the remaining 15 miles to Jefferson by stagecoach, and found herself standing in front of a 2-story wooden building that looked like it had seen better days. The paint was peeling, one of the shutters hung crooked, and the sign above the door reading Marcus's place swung slightly in the warm spring breeze. The building sat at the edge of Jefferson's Main Street, close enough to be convenient but far enough from the church and respectable businesses to maintain a certain distance. Jefferson was a bustling port town on the Big Cypress Bayou, alive with riverboat traffic and commerce. Cotton and timber moved through these waterways, and where trade flourished, entertainment establishments thrived. Delilah could hear music drifting from somewhere down the street, the sound of men's laughter, the clip-clop of horses on the muddy road. She pushed open the door with more confidence than she felt. The interior was dark and smelled of stale beer, tobacco smoke, and something else she could not quite identify. Dust motes danced in the shafts of sunlight that pierced through the gaps in the curtains. Tables and chairs sat scattered across the main floor, some overturned. The long bar that dominated one wall was scarred and stained. Behind it, shelves held an assortment of bottles, many empty. A piano sat in the corner, its keys yellowed with age. "You must be Miss Rawlings." Delilah spun around to find a woman standing in the doorway that led to the back rooms. She was perhaps 40 years old, with auburn hair piled high on her head, and a dress that was both expensive and entirely inappropriate for daytime wear. Her face was painted, but the makeup could not hide the wariness in her eyes. "I am," Delilah said, straightening her spine. "And you are, Ruby. I worked for your uncle." The woman's voice was careful, measured. "We all did. There were 5 of us girls, but the others cleared out as soon as Marcus died. I stayed to make sure nobody looted the place before you got here." "That was kind of you." Ruby laughed, a harsh sound. "Kind had nothing to do with it, honey. Marcus owed me back wages, and I figured his heir might make good on that debt. Plus, I have nowhere else to go at the moment." Delilah set down her traveling bag and looked around the room again, seeing it with new eyes. This was hers now. This entire scandalous, disreputable, impossible building was hers. The weight of it settled on her shoulders like a physical thing. "I have about $40 to my name," Delilah said slowly, After I pay you what you are owed, I will have even less. I do not know what I am going to do with this place. You could sell it, Ruby suggested, or run it the way Marcus did. The men in this town have money to spend, and they are not particular about where they spend it. I cannot do that. The words came out more forcefully than Delilah intended. I will not do that, Ruby shrugged. Then you best figure something out quick, because the building does not pay for itself. Taxes are due next month, and there are always repairs needed. Over the next few days, Delilah learned exactly how dire her situation was. The building needed work. The roof leaked in 3 places. The back door did not lock properly. Half the windows were cracked. The previous business had left debts with several local merchants who came calling as soon as word spread that Marcus's niece had arrived. After paying Ruby her back wages and settling the most pressing debts, Delilah had less than $15 remaining. She spent a full day scrubbing the main floor, washing the windows, and airing out the rooms upstairs. There were 6 small bedrooms on the 2nd floor, each furnished with a bed, a washstand, and little else. The rooms had clearly been designed for efficiency rather than comfort. Delilah tried not to think too hard about what had happened in these spaces. She was hauling a bucket of dirty water out the back door when she first saw him. He was working in the livery stable across the alley, visible through the wide open doors of the barn. Even from a distance, Delilah could tell he was tall, broad-shouldered, and moved with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin. He was leading a horse out of one of the stalls, speaking to the animal in a low voice she could not quite hear. The horse was limping. Delilah watched as the man ran his hands down the horse's leg with practiced gentleness, examining the hoof with careful attention. There was something mesmerizing about the way he worked, patient and thorough. He wore dusty denim pants, a shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal tanned forearms, and a hat that had seen better days. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up. Their eyes met across the alley, and Delilah felt something flutter in her chest. He had a strong jaw, dark hair that needed cutting, and eyes that seemed to see right through her. She looked away first, embarrassed to be caught staring. She dumped the dirty water and hurried back inside. The next morning, Delilah was attempting to fix the broken shutter when she heard a voice behind her. "You are going to fall and break your neck." She turned so quickly, she nearly lost her balance on the wobbly chair she was standing on. The man from the livery stable was standing at the bottom, looking up at her with an expression that might have been amusement. "I am managing just fine," Delilah said, which was a complete lie. She had already hit her thumb with the hammer twice and accomplished absolutely nothing. "I can see that." Now there was definitely amusement in his voice. "But I've got a ladder, and I reckon I am better with a hammer than you are. I do not need charity. Did not offer any. I am offering to fix your shutter before you kill yourself, and I have to deal with the guilt of watching it happen." Despite herself, Delilah felt her lips twitch toward a smile. She climbed down from the chair with as much dignity as she could muster. Up close, the man was even more imposing. He stood a full head taller than her, and there was a quiet strength about him that made her feel oddly safe. "Thank you," she said stiffly. "That is kind of you." "Ethan Ellis," he said, tipping his hat. "I work at the livery across the way. Delilah Rawlings. I recently inherited this building." "I heard. Word travels fast in Jefferson." He glanced up at the building, his expression neutral. "What are you planning to do with it?" "I have not decided yet." That was the truth. Delilah had lain awake the past 3 nights trying to figure out how to turn a former house of sin into something respectable. But ideas were in short supply. Ethan walked back across the alley and returned with a proper ladder and a toolbox. He set to work on the shutter without another word, and Delilah found herself watching him again. He moved with the same patient competence she had observed before, each motion deliberate and sure. "How long have you worked at the livery?" she asked, more to fill the silence than from genuine curiosity. "About 5 years. I came to Jefferson after the war, did some cattle driving for a while, then decided I preferred working with horses to working with cows." He glanced down at her. "Where are you from, Miss Rawlings?" "Boston." "And please call me Delilah." "Boston." He said it like he was tasting the word. "That is a long way from Texas. Very long." Delilah leaned against the wall, shading her eyes to look up at him. "I had never been west of New York before last month." "What made you come all the way out here to claim this place? Seems like it would have been easier to sell it sight unseen." "I needed a change," Delilah said quietly. "And I suppose I was curious about the uncle I never knew. Everyone in my family spoke of him like he was some kind of monster, but he left me everything he had. That must count for something." Ethan hammered in the last nail and climbed down the ladder. The shutter hung straight and true now. Marcus was not a monster. He ran a rough establishment, but he treated his employees fairly and did not cheat his customers. That is more than can be said for some of the supposedly respectable businessmen in this town. "You knew him?" "Well enough. He brought his horses to our stable." Ethan began gathering his tools. "For what it is worth, I think he would be glad to know a family member came to claim his property. He used to talk sometimes about the family back east. I got the sense he regretted leaving the way he did." The information settled something in Delilah's chest, some unnamed tension she had been carrying. "Thank you for telling me that, and thank you for fixing the shutter." "Anytime." Ethan tipped his hat again and started to walk away, then paused. "Delilah, if you need help with other repairs, I am handy with tools. I know you said you do not want charity, so I will make you a deal. You feed me supper while I work, and we will call it even." Delilah should have said no. She should have maintained proper distance from this man she barely knew. But something about Ethan Ellis made her want to say yes, and she was tired of doing what she should do instead of what she wanted. "That sounds fair," she said. "Can you come by tomorrow evening? I will be here." He was true to his word. The next evening, Ethan arrived just after 6 o'clock with his toolbox and a smile that made Delilah's heart do strange things. She had spent the day making a pot of beef stew with vegetables, using a portion of her dwindling funds to buy ingredients from the general store. The elderly shopkeeper had given her suspicious looks, but had taken her money readily enough. While Ethan worked on patching the leaks in the roof, Delilah set the small table in what had been Marcus's private living quarters behind the main saloon. The rooms were surprisingly cozy, with a bedroom, a sitting room, and a kitchen that needed cleaning but was functional. She had decided to make this space her home, at least for now. "That smells incredible," Ethan said when he finally came downstairs, his shirt damp with sweat and his hands freshly washed. "I have been eating my own cooking for the past year, and I can tell you, it is nothing like this." They sat across from each other at the small table, and for the first few minutes they ate in comfortable silence. Delilah found herself studying his hands, the way they moved, the small scars that marked them. They were working hands, strong and capable. "Can I ask you something?" Delilah said finally, "Sure." "Why are you helping me? You barely know me." Ethan set down his spoon and met her eyes directly. "Honestly." "Because I watched you scrubbing those windows 2 days ago, working yourself to the bone trying to make this place decent. And I thought to myself, there is a woman who is not afraid of hard work. Also because I know what it is like to be new in a place where nobody trusts you, and I figure everyone deserves a fair chance. What happened to you? I came back from the war different than I left. Folks in my hometown did not know what to do with me anymore. I did not know what to do with myself, so I came west to start over. He took another bite of stew. Seems like maybe you are doing the same thing. I suppose I am. Delilah folded her hands in her lap. I just wish I knew what I was starting over toward. I cannot run this building the way my uncle did. Even if I wanted to, which I do not, I would not know how. But I need to do something to earn money or I will lose it entirely. What did you do back in Boston? I was a seamstress. A good one, actually. Ethan leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. Jefferson does not have a proper dressmaker. The women around here either make their own clothes or order from catalogs and wait weeks for delivery. If you could set up a dress shop, I bet you would have customers. The idea sparked something in Delilah's mind. I could use the main floor. There is plenty of space and the light from the windows is good. I would need fabric, notions, a proper sewing machine. She did the calculations in her head and felt her excitement deflate. I do not have enough money for all that. Could you start small? Maybe take in mending and alterations at first, build up your funds and reputation. I could. Delilah felt hope beginning to bloom. Yes, I could do that. I have my sewing supplies from Boston and I can do basic repairs by hand. Once word spreads, if I do good work, women might trust me with their dressmaking. There you go, then. You have got yourself a plan. They talked late into the evening, Ethan offering suggestions and Delilah refining her ideas. By the time he left, she felt more optimistic than she had since arriving in Texas. She also felt something else, something warm and unsettling whenever Ethan looked at her with those steady brown eyes. Over the next 2 weeks, Ethan came by every evening. He fixed the cracked windows, repaired the back door lock, reinforced the loose boards on the porch. And every evening, Delilah cooked supper for both of them. They fell into an easy rhythm, working together, talking over meals, learning about each other in gradual increments. Delilah learned that Ethan was 26 years old, that he had grown up on a farm in Missouri, that he had joined the Union Army at 18 and spent 3 years seeing things no young man should see. He did not talk much about the war itself, but sometimes she saw shadows cross his face, and she understood there were memories he carried that weighed heavy. Ethan learned that Delilah loved books, that she had taught herself to sew when she was 8 years old, that her parents had died of fever when she was 19, and she had been on her own ever since. He learned that she was stubborn and proud and refused to accept help unless she felt she had earned it. He learned that her laugh was rare but beautiful, and making her laugh became one of his favorite challenges. Delilah also put up a sign offering mending and alterations, and to her relief, customers began to trickle in. The first was a rancher's wife who needed her husband's work shirts patched. Then a young woman who wanted a dress taken in. Then an older lady who had fabric she wanted made into curtains, but lacked the skill to do it herself. Word spread that Marcus's niece was talented with a needle, and while some of the more self-righteous townswomen refused to darken her door, enough others were practical enough to overlook the building's history in favor of good work at fair prices. One evening in early May, Delilah was sitting at the table in her living quarters, carefully counting the money she had earned that week when Ethan knocked on the open door. "Come in," she called, not looking up. "I am almost done with this. Take your time." But she could hear something in his voice that made her glance up. Ethan was leaning against the doorframe, his arms crossed, watching her with an expression she could not quite read. "What is it?" she asked. "I was just thinking," he said slowly. "We have been doing this for a while now, this arrangement of ours, and I have been wondering something." Delilah's heart began to beat faster. "Wondering what?" whether you see me as just the handyman you feed in exchange for repairs, or if maybe there is more to it than that." The question hung in the air between them. Delilah could have deflected, could have pretended she did not understand what he was asking. Instead, she found herself telling the truth. "There is more to it," she said quietly, "at least for me." Ethan pushed off from the doorframe and crossed the room to stand beside her chair. He reached down and took her hand, his touch gentle. "I am glad to hear that, because I have been half in love with you since I watched you trying to fix that shutter with pure determination and a wobbly chair." Delilah stood, her hand still in his, and looked up at him. "Half in love, only half," I was trying to be cautious. His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "But the truth is, Delilah Rawlings, I am completely in love with you. I love your strength and your stubbornness, and the way you refuse to let this town's judgment define you. I love how hard you work and how kind you are even when people do not deserve it. And I would very much like to kiss you, if you would let me." Instead of answering with words, Delilah rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, but then Ethan's arms came around her, and she melted into him. He kissed her like she was precious, like she was something worth cherishing, and Delilah felt tears prick at her eyes because she had never felt this way before, had never known that being held could feel like coming home. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "I do not have much to offer you," he said. "I make decent wages at the livery and I have some money saved, but I am not a rich man. I do not care about that." Delilah cupped his face in her hands. "I care about you, about who you are and how you make me feel." "How do I make you feel? Safe, happy, like I might actually be able to build a real life here." They stood there in the lamplight, holding each other, and Delilah thought about how strange life was. She had come to Jefferson expecting to feel lost, and instead she had found something she had not even known she was looking for. Over the following weeks, their relationship deepened. They were careful about propriety, aware that Delilah's reputation was already fragile given the building she owned. Ethan never stayed too late in the evenings, and they were always circumspect when others were around. But in private moments, stolen kisses and quiet conversations, their love grew. Delilah's business was growing too. She had saved enough to buy a used sewing machine from a family that was leaving town, and the increased efficiency allowed her to take on more complex projects. She made dresses for 2 of the saloon girls from the establishment down the street, and while some people whispered about it, Delilah held her head high. She was not going to judge women for making the best of difficult circumstances. She knew too well how few options were available to women without family or fortune. One afternoon in late June, a well-dressed woman entered the shop. Delilah recognized her as Mrs. Catherine Hartley, the wife of Jefferson's most prominent banker. She was in her mid-40s, elegantly coiffed, and had a reputation for being both influential and particular. "Miss Rawlings," Mrs. Hartley said, her tone neutral, "I have heard you do excellent work." "I do my best, madam," Delilah replied carefully. "What can I help you with, Mrs.?" Hartley pulled a fashion plate from her bag, showing an elaborate day dress with intricate pleating and detailed embroidery. "I would like you to make this for me. I have the fabric already." "Can you do it?" Delilah studied the design. It was challenging, but well within her capabilities. "Yes, madam. I can have it ready in 3 weeks. 2 weeks. My daughter is visiting from Dallas, and I want to wear it to the dinner we are hosting in her honor." It would mean long hours and careful work, but Delilah needed the job and the potential endorsement it represented. 2 weeks, then. Mrs. Hartley's expression softened slightly. "I will be honest with you, Miss Rawlings. I had my doubts about coming here. The history of this building is well known, but my husband's sister swears by your work, and she is not easily impressed. I am willing to give you a chance to prove yourself." "I appreciate that, Mrs. Hartley. I promise you will not be disappointed." Delilah worked on that dress with meticulous care, staying up late by lamplight to perfect every pleat, every stitch of embroidery. Ethan brought her dinner on the evenings when she was too absorbed to cook, sitting quietly while she worked, sometimes reading aloud from the newspaper to keep her company. "You are going to ruin your eyes," he said one night, watching her squint at a particularly delicate section of needlework. "Just a few more minutes. I want to finish this panel." He stood and moved behind her chair, his hands coming to rest on her shoulders. Gently, he began to massage the tight muscles, and Delilah groaned with relief. "You are taking too much on yourself," Ethan said softly. "Let me help." "What can I do? You are helping. This right here is exactly what I need." His hands stilled. "Delilah, I have been thinking about something." "What?" "How much longer we are going to keep pretending that we are not building towards something permanent." Delilah set down her needle and turned in her chair to look up at him. "What are you saying?" Ethan dropped to one knee beside her chair, taking both her hands in his. "I am saying that I do not want to spend my evenings in my rented room above the livery anymore. I want to spend them here with you. I am saying that I love you more than I thought it was possible to love another person. I am saying, Delilah Rawlings, will you marry me?" Tears spilled down Delilah's cheeks. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, absolutely yes." Ethan pulled her into his arms, kissing her deeply, and Delilah felt joy bubble up inside her like champagne. She was going to marry this good, kind man. She was going to build a life with him. All the hardship and uncertainty of the past months faded away in the face of this perfect, shining happiness. They were married on a sunny Saturday in July, in a simple ceremony at the small church at the edge of town. Ruby stood up as Delilah's witness, having become an unexpected friend over the past months. The stable owner where Ethan worked stood up for him. The church was not full, but enough people came to fill the pews partway, and Delilah was surprised to see Mrs. Hartley in attendance, wearing the dress Delilah had made. After the ceremony, they held a small reception in the main room of the building that Delilah had worked so hard to transform. Gone were the whiskey-stained tables and the peeling paint. The walls were clean and freshly painted a soft cream. The windows sparkled. One side of the room had been set up as the dress shop, with a few carefully arranged ready-made items and samples of Delilah's work. The other side held several tables where guests could sit and enjoy the simple refreshments. "You have done something remarkable here, Mrs. Hartley told Delilah, accepting a glass of lemonade. "When I heard Marcus Rawlings's niece was coming to claim this place, I thought it was a scandal waiting to happen. But you have proven me wrong. You have turned a shameful establishment into an honest business, and you have done it with dignity." "Thank you, Mrs. Hartley. That means more than you know." As the evening wore on and the guests departed, Ethan and Delilah found themselves alone in their transformed space. Ethan had moved his few possessions into the living quarters earlier that week, and now they stood together in what was truly their home. "Dance with me," Ethan said, pulling Delilah into his arms. There was no music, but he hummed softly as they swayed together in the lamplight. "I cannot believe this is real," Delilah murmured against his chest. 6 months ago I was alone in Boston, barely scraping by. Now I have a home, a business, and I am married to the best man I have ever known." "I am the lucky one," Ethan replied. "I get to spend the rest of my life with a woman who is beautiful, talented, stubborn as a mule, and brave enough to take a broken-down saloon and turn it into something good." "We turned it into something good," Delilah corrected. "I could not have done this without you. We make a good team." They stayed up late that night, talking about their dreams for the future. Ethan wanted to eventually save enough to buy his own stable. Delilah wanted to expand the dress shop, maybe even hire an assistant. They both wanted children, a family to fill the rooms upstairs that had once housed such different occupants. The next months passed in a blur of work and contentment. Delilah's business continued to grow. Women throughout Jefferson and from surrounding ranches sought her services. She hired Ruby to help with the simpler mending jobs, giving her friend a steady income and a fresh start. Ethan continued working at the livery but spent every spare moment helping Delilah with the building and the business. In the evenings, they would sit together in their private quarters, Delilah sewing while Ethan read or worked on repairing tack from the stable. Sometimes they would take walks along the bayou, watching the riverboats pass and planning their future. On Sundays, they attended church together, and gradually, even the most judgmental members of the congregation began to soften toward them. One cool October evening, Delilah was feeling unusually tired. She had been fighting waves of nausea for the past week, dismissing it as something she ate or perhaps just working too hard. But when the room suddenly spun, and she had to grab the edge of the table to steady herself, Ethan noticed immediately. "You are not well," he said, concern etched on his face. "I am fetching the doctor." "No, I am fine, just a little dizzy." "Delilah." His voice was firm. "You are going to let me take care of you the way you always take care of everyone else. Sit down, I will be back with the doctor." "Doctor." Morrison was an elderly man who had been practicing medicine in Jefferson for 30 years. He examined Delilah with professional efficiency, asked a series of questions that made her blush, and then smiled broadly. "Mrs. Ellis, unless I am very much mistaken, you are going to have a baby. I would estimate you are about 2 months along, which means you should expect to welcome a little one around next May." Delilah stared at him, her hand instinctively moving to her still flat stomach. "A baby? Yes, indeed. Congratulations to you both." After the doctor left, Delilah and Ethan sat together on their bed, holding hands, trying to process the news. A baby. They were going to be parents. "Are you happy?" Delilah asked softly, searching Ethan's face. "Happy," he laughed, a sound of pure joy. "Delilah, I am thrilled." "Terrified, but thrilled. We are going to have a family." He pulled her close, cradling her against him, and Delilah felt tears of happiness slide down her cheeks. Everything was coming together in ways she never could have imagined. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the fall and into winter. Delilah continued working, though she tired more easily and had to take frequent breaks. Ruby took on more responsibilities in the shop, proving to be surprisingly talented at basic alterations. Ethan became almost comically protective, worrying whenever Delilah lifted anything heavier than a pincushion. Christmas that year was the happiest Delilah could remember. She and Ethan decorated their living quarters with pine branches and berries, and on Christmas morning, Ethan gave her a rocking chair he had built himself, designed perfectly for nursing a baby. Delilah gave him a new leather-bound journal for recording horse pedigrees and training notes, something he had been wanting. As winter turned to spring, Delilah grew round with the baby. She had to alter her dresses to accommodate her changing shape, and she found herself fascinated by the movement of the child inside her. Ethan would place his hand on her belly in the evenings, marveling each time he felt a kick. "Strong one like his mother," Ethan would say. "Or her mother," Delilah would counter. "We do not know yet. Boy or girl does not matter to me, as long as you are both healthy." On a warm afternoon in mid-May, Delilah was working on hemming a skirt when the first contraction hit. She gasped, gripping the edge of the table, and Ruby immediately understood. "It is time. Ruby asked. I think so. Ruby ran to fetch Ethan and the doctor while Delilah made her way upstairs to the bedroom. The labor was long and difficult. The afternoon faded into evening, evening into night, and still the baby did not come. Delilah was exhausted, frightened, and in more pain than she had ever experienced. But Ethan never left her side, holding her hand, wiping her face with cool cloths, whispering encouragement. You can do this, he told her. You are the strongest person I know, just a little longer. Finally, as dawn was breaking on a new day, their son entered the world with a lusty cry, Doctor. Morrison cleaned the baby and placed him in Delilah's arms, and she looked down at the tiny, perfect face and felt her heart expand in ways she had not known were possible. He is beautiful, she whispered. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, his arm around Delilah, staring at their son with wonder. We made him. We made this perfect little person. What should we name him? Delilah asked. They had discussed names but had not settled on anything. Now, looking at her son, Delilah knew exactly what felt right. What about Samuel? It means asked of God, and it feels like he was a gift I did not even know to ask for. Samuel Ellis. Ethan tested the name. I like it. Samuel Marcus Ellis, after your uncle. Delilah felt tears spring to her eyes. Yes, that is perfect. The next weeks were a blur of sleepless nights and overwhelming love. Samuel was a healthy baby with a good set of lungs and his father's dark hair. Delilah divided her time between caring for him and running the shop, with Ruby handling more of the daily operations. Ethan took on extra work at the stable to ensure they had enough money for all the baby's needs. Despite the exhaustion, Delilah had never been happier. She would sit in the rocking chair Ethan had made, nursing Samuel, and look around at the life they had built. The house that had once been a place of vice and questionable reputation was now a thriving dress shop on the first floor and a warm, loving home in the private quarters. They had taken something broken and made it whole. One afternoon, when Samuel was about 3 months old, Delilah was working in the shop while Ruby watched the baby upstairs. Mrs. Hartley came in with another woman Delilah did not recognize. Miss Rawlings, I mean Mrs. Ellis, Mrs. Hartley said warmly. I wanted to introduce you to Mrs. Patricia Summers. She is new to Jefferson and she is looking for a dressmaker. It is lovely to meet you, Delilah said, shaking the woman's hand. Mrs. Summers smiled. Mrs. Hartley has been singing your praises. She said you are the finest seamstress in East Texas. That is very kind of her to say. It is also the truth, Mrs. Hartley interjected. Now, Patricia needs a new wardrobe. Her husband just purchased the new dry goods store and she wants to make a good impression in the community. I told her you were exactly the person to see. By the time Mrs. Summers left, Delilah had orders for 4-day dresses, 2 evening gowns, and a walking suit. It was more work than she had taken on at once since before Samuel's birth, but it was also evidence of how far her reputation had come. That evening, after Samuel was asleep and she and Ethan were sitting together in their living room, Delilah reflected on everything that had changed. You remember when you first came to fix my shutter? She asked. Ethan pulled her closer on the sofa. Of course. You were standing on that wobbly chair, looking determined and slightly ridiculous. I had no idea what I was doing. I was terrified. You were brave. You still are. I do not feel brave. I feel lucky. Lucky that you walked into my life. Lucky that this town gave me a second chance. Lucky that my uncle left me this place, even though at first it seemed like a curse. Marcus would be proud of what you have done here, Ethan said. He wanted to be remembered as more than just a saloon keeper. Through you, he is. His legacy is not a house of ill repute. It is a successful business and a happy family. Delilah turned in his arms to kiss him properly. I love you, Ethan Ellis. I love you too. The years that followed were full and rich. When Samuel was 2 years old, Delilah became pregnant again. Their daughter, Rose Catherine, was born in the spring of 1881, a tiny thing with her mother's blonde hair and her father's brown eyes. Samuel was fascinated by his baby sister, always wanting to help care for her. The dress shop continued to prosper. Ruby became a full partner in the business, skilled enough now to handle complex alterations and even some basic dressmaking. They hired another young woman to help with the mending, giving steady employment to 3 people. Ethan achieved his dream of buying his own stable. The owner of the livery where he worked wanted to retire, and with some careful saving and a loan from the bank, Ethan was able to purchase the business. He renamed it Ellis Stable and Livery, and his reputation for honest dealing and expert horsemanship brought in customers from all over the region. When Samuel was 4 and Rose was 2, Delilah realized she was pregnant again. This time, there were no complications, and in the winter of 1883 they welcomed twin boys into the family. Ethan held both sons, one in each arm, and declared himself the richest man in Texas. The house that had once been Marcus's place was now firmly established as Ellis Dress Shop on the main floor, with the Ellis family living comfortably in the expanded living quarters. Ethan had added 2 more rooms upstairs to accommodate their growing family, transforming the former brothel rooms into a proper home. One evening when Samuel was 8 years old, he asked his mother about the building's history. He had overheard some boys at school talking about it, saying mean things about the house his family lived in. Delilah sat down with her son and spoke honestly. This building used to be a saloon, and it was a place where some things happened that were not respectable. But your great-uncle Marcus owned it, and when he died, he left it to me. I came here from Boston not knowing what I would find. I was scared and uncertain, but I decided that the past does not have to define the future. Your father helped me turn this place into something good and honest. We made it into a home. Why did great-uncle Marcus leave it to you if you had never met him? I think because he wanted someone in his family to know that he was more than his mistakes, and he wanted to give me a chance at a better life. This building represents second chances, Samuel. It represents the idea that you can take something broken and make it whole again. Samuel thought about this seriously. I am glad great-uncle Marcus left it to you. Otherwise, you and Papa might never have met and we would not be here. That is exactly right. The children grew up healthy and happy. Samuel showed an aptitude for working with horses and spent many hours at his father's stable. Rose inherited her mother's skill with sewing and was designing her own doll clothes by the time she was 7. The twins, whom they had named James and Thomas, were adventurous and mischievous but fundamentally good-hearted. On a warm May evening in 1888, Delilah and Ethan celebrated their 10th wedding anniversary. The children were spending the night with Ruby, who had married a kindly shopkeeper and lived just down the street. Delilah and Ethan had the house to themselves for the first time in years. They sat together on the front porch, watching the sun set over Jefferson, listening to the sounds of the town settling into evening. Riverboats moved slowly along the bayou. Someone was playing a fiddle somewhere down the street. The air smelled of honeysuckle and possibility. "Do you ever regret it?" Ethan asked. "Leaving Boston, coming out here?" "Never," Delilah said firmly. "This is where I was meant to be, with you, with our children in this house that we made into a home. It has been quite a journey, the best journey of my life." Ethan took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "Remember when we first met? You were so prickly, so determined not to accept help. I thought you were just being kind because you felt sorry for me. I was being kind because I could see what you were trying to do and I admired it. The feeling sorry for you part came later, when I realized you actually thought you could fix that shutter with that ridiculous chair." Delilah laughed, swatting his arm. "You are never going to let me forget that, are you?" "Never. It is one of my favorite memories." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, then Ethan spoke again. "I have been thinking we should do something special to commemorate this anniversary, something that honors how far we have come. What did you have in mind? What if we commissioned a new sign for the shop? Something beautiful and permanent that makes it clear this is your business, your achievement. Ellis Dress Shop and Tailoring, maybe. We could have it painted by that artist from Shreveport, the one who did the sign for the bank." Delilah's eyes filled with tears. Throughout their marriage, Ethan had always found ways to honor her work, to make it clear he saw her as an equal partner in building their life. "I would love that." The new sign went up a month later, professionally painted in elegant letters with decorative scrollwork. The day it was installed, half the town seemed to come by to admire it. Even the most respectable ladies who had once refused to enter the building now came through the doors without hesitation. The building's scandalous past had been thoroughly overwritten by its respectable present. As the years continued to pass, the Ellis family became one of the most respected in Jefferson. Samuel eventually took over his father's stable, running it with the same integrity Ethan had established. Rose opened her own millinery shop, specializing in beautiful hats that complemented her mother's dresses. The twins, after a wild youth that gave their parents more than a few gray hairs, both became successful in their own right, one as a lawyer and the other as a teacher. On a golden afternoon in the autumn of 1905, Delilah was sitting in her now worn rocking chair, holding her first grandchild. Samuel's daughter, a tiny thing named Emma, slept peacefully in her arms. Ethan sat beside her, his hair now silver, his face lined but still handsome. "We did all right, did we not?" Delilah said softly, so as not to wake the baby. "We did better than all right. We did magnificently. I was thinking about that telegram today, the one that came telling me about Uncle Marcus. If that telegram had never arrived, if I had decided to stay in Boston, my life would have been so different. Do you ever wonder what would have happened? Sometimes. But mostly I just feel grateful. Grateful for every choice that led me here. Grateful for the house that no decent woman should own, because it gave me everything that matters." Ethan leaned over to kiss her forehead. "It was never about the house, Delilah. It was always about you. Your courage, your determination, your refusal to let anyone else define who you were supposed to be. The house was just wood and nails. You were the one who made it a home." "We made it a home," Delilah corrected, as she always did. "Together." Little Emma stirred in her arms, making soft baby sounds. Delilah looked down at her granddaughter and thought about legacy, about the unexpected paths life took, about how something that seemed like a disaster could turn into the greatest blessing. She thought about the frightened young woman who had stepped off the stagecoach in Jefferson nearly 30 years ago, staring at a building she did not want and could not imagine keeping. She thought about the kind cowboy who had seen past her prickly exterior to the person underneath. She thought about all the work and love and determination it had taken to transform a house of ill repute into a thriving business and a warm family home. Most of all, she thought about the life she had built with Ethan, a life richer and fuller than anything she had imagined possible back in her lonely Boston boarding house room. "Tell me again," Delilah said, as she had asked countless times over the years. "Tell me about the first time you saw me." Ethan smiled, recognizing the familiar request. It was a story he never tired of telling. "I was working in the stable, and I looked up to see this beautiful woman hauling a bucket of water out the back door. She had dirt on her face and her hair was coming out of its pins, and she looked exhausted. But there was something in the set of her shoulders, something that said she was not going to give up no matter how hard things got. I thought to myself, that is the kind of woman worth knowing. And then the next day, you found me standing on that chair. On that ridiculous, wobbly chair, trying to fix a shutter with pure stubbornness since you clearly had no idea how to use a hammer. I knew how to use a hammer. You hit your thumb twice, Delilah. I watched you do it. She laughed, the sound warm and familiar after so many years together. Well, I may not have known how to use a hammer, but I knew enough to accept help when a handsome cowboy offered it. Best decision you ever made. Second best, Delilah corrected. The best was deciding to come to Jefferson in the first place. Everything else flowed from that. They sat together in the afternoon light, holding the newest generation of their family, reflecting on everything they had built together. The dress shop on the first floor was quieter now. Delilah had officially retired last year, though she still came down occasionally to work on special projects. Rose ran the business now with the same dedication her mother had shown. The building itself showed the passage of time. The wood was weathered despite regular paint. The floors creaked in familiar places. But it was solid, well-maintained, and full of memories. Every corner held a story, every room had witnessed moments of joy and struggle and triumph. "You think Uncle Marcus would be pleased?" Delilah asked. "With what we made of his legacy?" Ethan considered the question seriously. "I think he would be amazed, and yes, pleased. You took something that was ending and turned it into something that will last for generations. Our children, our grandchildren, they will all carry forward the values we taught them here. Honesty, hard work, kindness, the willingness to give people second chances. That is the real legacy." As the afternoon faded toward evening, their children began arriving for the family dinner they held every Sunday. Samuel with his wife and baby Emma. Rose with her husband and their 2 sons. James with his wife, who was expecting their first child. Thomas with his wife and their daughter. The house filled with noise and laughter and love. 3 generations gathered together in the space that had once been so disreputable. During dinner, with all the family crowded around the large table that Ethan had built to accommodate their growing numbers, Delilah looked around at the faces she loved most in the world. This was what mattered. Not the building's scandalous past, not the judgment they had faced, not the struggles they had overcome. These people, this love, this was everything. After the meal, after the dishes were washed and the grandchildren were running around the yard in the twilight, Delilah found a quiet moment alone with Ethan on their front porch, sitting in the same spots they had occupied on countless evenings over the past decades. "I have been thinking," Delilah said, "about what to do with the building when we are gone." "That is morbid talk for such a nice evening. Practical talk. We are not getting any younger, Ethan Ellis." He took her hand, his grip still strong despite the arthritis that had begun to trouble his fingers. "What are you thinking?" "I want to make sure it stays in the family. Rose is already running the dress shop and she is doing beautifully. Samuel has the stable. But this building, our home, I want to make sure it goes to someone who will appreciate its history. Someone who will understand what it represents. Have you thought about who that might be? What about making it clear in our will that it should stay as both a business and a family home for as long as possible? That it should be a place where people can always come for honest work and fair dealing? That it should continue to be a symbol of second chances?" Ethan nodded slowly. "I like that. We could set it up so the dress shop continues, maybe with living quarters for whichever family member is running it. Keep it exactly as we intended it to be." They talked late into the evening, making plans, discussing details. By the time they went to bed, They had agreed on what they wanted for the building's future. The next week, they met with James, who had become a lawyer, and had him draw up the necessary documents. The years continued to flow past, as years do. Delilah and Ethan grew older together, their love deepening with each passing season. They watched their grandchildren grow and eventually welcomed great-grandchildren. The house remained central to the family, a gathering place for celebrations and comfort during difficult times. On a spring morning in 1912, Ethan woke with a pain in his chest. By afternoon, despite the doctor's best efforts, he was gone. He died in the bed he had shared with Delilah for over 30 years, holding her hand, surrounded by his children and grandchildren. His last words were, "I love you, Delilah. Thank you for the most wonderful life." Delilah was devastated by the loss. For weeks, she moved through the house like a ghost, unable to accept that Ethan was truly gone. But gradually, supported by her family and her memories, she found her way back to living. She continued to find joy in her grandchildren, in her work when she felt up to it, in the community she had become such an integral part of. She lived for another 8 years, dying peacefully in her sleep at the age of 81. Her last conscious thought was of Ethan and the deep certainty that she would see him again. The house passed to Rose as they had planned. She continued to run the dress shop with the same standards her mother had established, and she raised her own children in the upstairs rooms where Delilah and Ethan had built their family. The building's reputation as a place of honest business and warm hospitality only grew stronger with time. Generations later, the Ellis family still told the story of their matriarch who had inherited a house no decent woman should own, and the cowboy who had helped her turn it into a home. They told of courage and love, of hard work and determination, of refusing to let the past define the future. The building itself stood for well over 100 years, a testament to the strength of what Delilah and Ethan had built together. It weathered economic depressions and world wars, technological changes and social upheavals. Through it all, it remained what it had been from the moment Delilah decided to stay and fight for it. A place of second chances, a place of love, a place of home. And if sometimes, late at night, people claimed they could hear the faint sound of laughter or see the shadow of a man and woman dancing together in the moonlight, well, that was just part of the building's legacy too. Love like Delilah and Ethan's does not simply disappear. It becomes woven into the very fabric of a place, blessing all who come after. The house no decent woman should own had become the home that love built, and that home stood as a beacon of hope and possibility for all who needed to believe that the future could be better than the past, that dedication and love could transform anything, and that sometimes the greatest blessings come from the most unlikely places. In the end, it was never about the building at all. It was about the people who filled it with love, who chose each other day after day, who built something beautiful from broken pieces. It was about Delilah's courage and Ethan's steadiness, about their unwavering commitment to each other and to the family they created together. It was about a telegram that changed everything, a wobbly chair and a broken shutter, a cowboy with kind eyes and a woman brave enough to start over. It was about pot roast dinners and stolen kisses, about babies born and dreams realized, about a love that lasted a lifetime and beyond. It was about taking something shameful and making it honorable, something ending and making it a beginning, something broken and making it whole. It was about home in all its messy, beautiful, perfectly imperfect reality. And in the heart of Jefferson, Texas, for as long as the building stood, that story lived on, whispered by the wind through the eaves, written in the grain of the wood, present in every beam and board. The house that had begun as Marcus's place, that had briefly been simply the Ellis home, became in family memory simply the house, as if no other designation were needed. The house where Grandma Delilah had started with nothing and built everything. The house where great-grandpa Ethan had courted his bride over hammer and nails. The house that proved love and determination could overcome any obstacle, any judgment, any past. The house that had always been, in the truest sense, exactly what Delilah and Ethan made it. A home built on love, sustained by faith and blessed beyond measure. A home that stood as living proof that it is not where you start that matters, but where you choose to go and who you choose to walk beside along the way. Their love story, born from unlikely circumstances and built through hard work and unwavering devotion, became the foundation not just for a building, but for a family legacy that would endure for generations. And that legacy whispered a truth that anyone who needed to hear it could understand, that you are not defined by what you inherit, but by what you do with it. That love, real love, can transform anything. That home is not a place you find, but something you build, brick by brick, day by day, with the person you choose to stand beside through all of life's joys and challenges. Delilah inherited a house no decent woman should own. With Ethan beside her, she turned it into a home that would shelter, nurture, and inspire her family for over a century. And that transformation, that beautiful, improbable, perfect transformation, was the greatest legacy she could have left behind.